Hey everyone, Mo here, and before the video begins, I just want to let you guys know that my schedule has opened up for me to do coaching again. So if you're interested in private one-on-one coaching for me to help you, whether you're a newer player and you want to excel at the game very quickly and learn the fundamentals without developing any bad habits early, or if you're an experienced player who's already maybe platinum or diamond in your top 1%, but you need some help filling in the gap to get you to that 0.01%, to make you just some of the best, then hit me up on Discord and I can get you in some private one-on-one coaching lessons to help you polish up any skills you want to refine and help you learn all of the secrets to becoming a top player. That's it. I hope you enjoy the video. Hey everybody, Mo here, and today I'm bringing you guys another Meta Monday. This Meta Monday, I'm just going to be going over, for those of you that are new here, I go over the top 8 most played decks in Masters Ladder to give you guys an idea of what to expect on your climb, on your grind in LoR, as well as to kind of give you guys an idea of how well some of the decks are doing in today's meta. So I'm going to go over the top 8 most played decks, and then I'm just going to look over the top 3 with the highest win rate. So these are the most played decks, so this is what you can expect to hit on ladder, especially once you get into those higher ranks. It can kind of help you make a better informed decision on what deck you should play on your ladder climb to try to get to the highest rank or whatever, your goal is. This can make it a little bit easier for you. If you can find a deck that beats, some of these other decks, like, oh, I can find a deck that beats 6 of these top 8 most played decks, then all of a sudden you have a favored matchup, 20% of the time. Which is extremely good on ladder, especially with the format of best of one closed deck list. Getting a favorable matchup for you is extremely important. So before we get into the video, I wanted to remind you guys that, drumroll, 68% of the people watching this video aren't subscribed to me. So pretty excited. First of all, the number's going down, so I really appreciate that. We used to be at like 77, and then it dropped down to like 72. Then it went up to 75 because more people were watching, but less people were subscribing. But now you guys are being fucking amazing, and you guys are all subscribing, or at least most of you are. If you're not, you should subscribe. So numbers got down to only 68%, so I'm pretty happy with that. But I'm sure we can get it lower. So if you enjoy these Meta Mondays, if you enjoy competitive decks, I was kind of AWOL last week for kind of personal reasons, hanging out with my family and stuff like that. But this week, I literally have a video lined up for every single day this week going into the next Meta Monday. So I have a lot of LOR content coming for you this week, and I plan to keep at least 5 videos a week for you guys. So hit that subscribe button if you like competitive content, if you like deck lists, deck guides, Meta Mondays, tournament meta reports, all that type of stuff. This is the place to be. So without further ado, let's get into the Meta Monday. So number 1, our most played deck and the most controversial deck right now in LOR is Thralls. I don't think this was a surprise to anybody that Thralls is the most played. Very controversial. A lot of people are saying Thralls is too good. I kind of went over this last week, so there's not too much to go over this week. But my opinion is still the people that hate Thralls are people that play decks that lose to Thralls. Thralls is a very polarizing deck. Just like with most fairly word control decks, it's extremely polarizing. It either beats you really hard or it loses to you really hard. And the reason I think it's weird that people are complaining about Thralls so much, to the point that even my friend, one of like closest friends, doesn't even play LOR anymore, but still follows LOR Twitter. But he doesn't even play LOR anymore, and his entire timeline is nothing but just like people complaining about Thralls or winning Thralls nerfed, and like just all this BS about Thralls, to where he DM'd me and was like, hey, I don't play LOR anymore, but why are people complaining about this deck? So I let him know. It's like the weird thing to me is that there are so many good decks that beat this deck. It's not even just like, oh yeah, you can beat it with these fringe counter decks that lose to everything else. It's like, no, you can beat it with like good real decks. Like Galio Bard beats it. Fizz Riven probably doesn't beat it, but like Viego Nox beats it. Like Mono Azir beats it. There's just like Azir Aurelia beats it. Lurk beats it. There's so many decks that actually beat Thralls that are good tier 1 decks. Like Alawi decks beat it. Like these you see right here, like Alawi Ionia, Alawi Demacia. Like you see right here, all of it's like really bad matchups. Like Burn, any aggro to it is like really good into Thralls. So I really don't understand the hate around Thralls. Like, yes, the deck can high roll you. It can go like turn 4 summon 2 Thralls, or turn 5 summon 4 Thralls. But one, that's like an extremely rare not hand. I've literally never had somebody turn 5 4 Thralls me. And 2, most of your good decks can also have an insane high roll to deal with that. Because if a person is doing this like, oh, turn 4 2 Thralls or turn 5 4 Thralls you, that means they're probably not interacting with the board at all. And most of your good tier 1 decks can kill your opponent. If your opponent does nothing for essentially nothing to the board state for 4 turns and you don't kill them, then your deck is just bad. And in that case, like, just play a better deck. It is quite literally that simple. Like, it's not that hard to beat Thralls if you are playing the right deck. The issue comes when people play bad decks into Thralls, or not even bad decks, but just like decks that have bad matchups into Thralls, and then they go, oh my god, I'm losing to Thralls all the time. This deck is broken. It's like, it's just a matchup thing. Like, if you play a bad matchup into Thralls, you'll lose to it, and then you go onto Twitter. If you play a good matchup into Thralls, you'll beat it most of the time. Like, yeah, they can high roll you, but you can usually high roll them. So that's my take on Thralls, and that's probably going to be the most, the biggest kind of like rant, because again, it's another week of Thralls being number 1, which, you know, is whatever, and it's another week of people doing nothing. Like, the win rate's not even that high. Like, it's a 54% win rate. We've literally had decks that have like 58% win rates in this game. You know, like 57, 58% win rates. Like, the win rate, it has the same win rate as Jace Heimerdinger. But like, people aren't complaining about Jace Heimerdinger because why? You know, like, it has a lower win rate than Jace Heimerdinger, in fact. But people aren't complaining about Jace Heimerdinger because it's a less play deck, and people are like, I don't know. People just like to complain. That's what I get out of all of it, is people like to complain. Number 2, second most played deck in Masters right now is Annie Jin. I assume Burn. Yep, it's just Burn. So again, 49% win rate. I think the win rate went up a little bit from last week, but I'm under the same impression of if once people start building the deck better and kind of playing it better, the deck will just become better. For instance, I think Doom Beast is pretty bad. I don't play a single Doom Beast in my deck list. I play like all of the stuns, so like this right here plays like Stunhawk, Stagehand, Sentry as well, but I play some of the Ravenbloom Conservatories because I think that card is broken. So I play some of those. Yeah, I think that's just the main difference, is I play like it's probably just like a second Arachnoid and then like 2 Conservatories, something like that. But yeah, I think this deck's really good. I think it's being played not the greatest, but it is what it is. So I think once people kind of pilot it more correctly, I think once the play rate goes down a little bit, we'll see the win rate go up. Because I think what it is I said this last week too, is a lot of people kind of just pick up these burn decks and these aggro decks, and they're like, haha, me play aggro brain dead, I'm just going to throw cards on the table. And then they lose, because that's not how you play aggro. That's not how you play any deck, is just by throwing cards down and turning them sideways. But they do that because they have this like mentality of aggro easy, aggro brain dead, let me turn cards sideways and win. They don't win, and then they say shit like, oh, Thrall's broken, this deck suck. You know, they're like, oh, Annie Jin just sucks because I like lost with it or whatever. But like, the deck's like really good. I think it just takes people to pilot it better. People to pilot it well. And it would get better. I think if people treated it with more respect and played it like while using their brain, it'd have a higher win rate for sure. Next up, Bart Galio. This win rate actually went down from last week. I think because a lot of people are getting used to it, and this is going to be a trend that we'll see kind of overall here, is some of these newer decks that were really good last week are kind of still up there in play rate, but kind of down in win rate. That's going to be for 2 reasons. One, because probably more people are picking it up. So when you have more people playing the deck, the average win rate's probably going to go down because the average player is probably not the greatest. So that's one reason why the win rate can go down. But also, and this is the bigger one, is people just like learn the deck, right? So the first week that this deck gets out, everyone's like, holy shit, what does it do? I don't know. I'm scared. And, you know, it just like destroys people. And after people play against it for a week, they're like, okay, I know what to deal with you. I know what the threats are. I know how to play around this. I know, you know, like to open attacker. I know to play around Aegis, or I know that you only run one like Aegis, so I don't have to play around it and stuff like that. And that's going to be another reason. But deck is still very solid. You know, anything with 50% win rate is considered balance. Once you get above 55 or around 55, that's when it's considered, you know, kind of OP. But as long as things are sitting around 50%, that's when they're considered like balance in the card game. Number 4, Fizz Riven. So this deck's, I think is really good. I think this is probably one of the most underrated decks, even though it is number 4 on the most played decks in Masters. I think it is one of the most underrated decks for sure. I think people underrate its just raw power. I think people are underrating Nox's Tellstones. I think this deck is extremely strong, and I would not be surprised if this deck beats Thralls, which I don't know if it does. Because I actually have not played that matchup, and it looks like there's not enough data here to really tell you. You're like slightly favored, like 54. So you're like slightly favored into Thralls, then this deck is gonna rise in popularity. Like, if you want a secret, like a secret deck to just kind of like, oh, I only have a weekend to grind, or I have like limited time, what is the best deck for ladder? I honestly think it's I think it's Riven Fizz. I almost said TF Fizz. Rest in peace for those of you that lived through that. But I think Riven Fizz is like actually the secret OP deck right now, and I think it's really slept on. I think it's severely underplayed. Like, this should be like the second most played deck in the game, with how just powerful it is. Deck number 5 is Ruben Pile, aka Targon PNZ random cards. So with the addition of Winding Light, it kind of brought back these Pile-esque decks that are just like, oh, I'm just going to kind of outgrind you in the early game, outvalue you a little bit, because I play things like, I guess this one doesn't have it, but a lot of them play like the 3-mana Invoke Solari Priestess. Some of them play Lunari Priestess. But basically the goal is to play like just a bunch of early game units to kind of trade your board away. This version, the newer versions kind of remind me a lot of how old Yordle Arms played. This deck is really much just like, oh, I'm just going to trade units away because I play a bunch of them. You know, I play Poro Cannon to give me a bunch of like elusive units. Boom 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 2-for-1 you. Pharaoh's Financer gives me value. There's Flame Chompers. There's Mountain Goat. Like, Zoe can find you units off of her super cool star chart. And so you're just kind of like taking control of the board, making your units bigger than your opponents, are going wider, and then eventually you just slam down a Winding Light on turn 7. Sometimes turn 6 if you get a Moon Silver off of star chart. But most of the time, turn 7, you're just like slamming down a Winding Light and telling your opponent, okay, deal with all of these like really big Overwhelm units. Like, this card is essentially just Yordle Arms on a stick, except it also gives your units Overwhelm, which is pretty sick. And so if you give your units +2/+1 and Overwhelm, like your elusive units, like that right there is going to be 6 damage for free. Any other unit, like this unit is for sure getting, you know, at least some damage through probably. And then on top of that, you play 3 Mystics, 3 Get Excited for some burn. You play a Celestial Trifecta for the late game carry. So this deck is really cool, but it's not the easiest to play. And if you don't draw a Winding Light, it's kind of hard for you to end games. So that's why I'm not really a fan of this deck, because it feels very much like you have to draw a Winding Light, or you're gonna run out of resources or run out of cards. Like, if you draw a Winding Light too late, then you might not have a board, because you would have had to block because you're trying to not die to the opponent doing stuff. And you're like, oh, I finally drew my Winding Light on, like, you know, turn 10 or turn 13, and you only have like 2 units in play, and you're at, you know, a low HP. If you see here, it's not playing any star chart or any star shaping. It's not playing any guiding touch. You have no healing in this version outside of the Aphelios Moon Weapon. So outside of Severum from Aphelios, this deck has literally no healing. So it's and like, unless you get really lucky and invoke the Golden Sisters, it's literally like invoke Golden Sisters or exactly Severum off of Aphelios. That's the only way to gain life in this version. So I'm not a fan of it, but I understand why people play it. It obviously isn't doing too bad. It has 54% win rate. So very good. It's very good into Viego Nox, which is what we're going to cover next, because it plays a lot of Equinox. This version doesn't play any Hush, but Equinox is really good into Viego Noxes. Like, being able to go 1 mana, your Hydrovine's no longer a unit. 1 mana, your Legion Deserter is no longer a unit, is humongous. Of course, you know, you're kind of lacking Comets to kill Viego, especially with this version not playing Solari Priestess. But if you throw in some Solari Priestess, you now have Comets to deal with Viego, and you have Equinox to deal with all of the like followers. So as a really good matchup with the Noxus Viego, which is, I actually think, the most played deck in the game. It's the second most played deck. So Noxus Viego, even though it looks like it's 6 and 7, the weird thing about this stats is that this isn't taking into account every single Noxus Viego deck list. So you see here, this is like Viego, Elise, Katarina. This is Viego, Elise. I personally play Viego, Elise, Katarina, Kindred. You know, there are some people out there that just play like Viego, Elise, Kindred. So there are many different versions of Viego Noxus. So I would not be surprised if Viego Noxus was actually the most played deck. But we can see right here, it's at least the second most played deck. I mean, this is like, what, a 5.1% play rate? And so if there's a 1.6% other like variance of this out there, then this is tied for or the most played deck in the game. So this is kind of janky because of how the deck building goes, but it's second most played deck in the game. But we see the win rate's kind of dropped a little bit. The play rate hasn't dropped, but the win rate has a little bit. And I think this goes back to the exact same reason as the Bart Galio. I think, one, more people play it, and the average player probably drags down the win rate. And then two, and the bigger thing, the more important reason why, or probably reason why, is people just finally learned what the deck does. People are like, okay, I don't want to kill this. I don't want to trade into here. I have to be able to have an answer for a deserter. Okay, I want to kill your units before you play, before turn 5 when you get to slam down Viego and start getting Risen Mists going. So it's like, oh, I have to try to trade with your units now because once you play Viego, it's going to be really difficult to ever fight for board again. So once people kind of got an idea of how to play around decks, you'll see the win rate go down, and that's what we see here with the Viego Noxus. Deck is still really good. It's just that people are figuring out ways to play around it and play into it, so it's not as dominant as before. And then the last deck is Jace Heimerdinger. I believe this also has a good win rate into Viego Noxus. I personally don't think it does. Like, if I were to play, I wouldn't mind playing into this as Viego Noxus, but my teammates and obviously the stats here tell me that this deck is in fact good into Viego Noxus, so that's probably the most reason why it's played, on top of just being good against aggro in general. I mean, you're playing Piercing, Darkness, Vile Vs. Some of these decks play Withering Wail instead of like Vengeances, so you get to play a bunch of life gain. On top of that, this is a tech heavy version, so you're playing like Adaptatrons, and the goal is, and Hextech Handler, so your goal is to get a bunch of like really big techs and kind of kill your opponent. I think this deck is very, very solid. I think this deck isn't the most intuitive thing to play, and that could kind of scare some people away, but I think this deck is very solid, especially if you plan to play against like Viego, Noxus, and aggro, then this deck is going to be the deck for you. So that's the 8 most played decks. So we're going to take a look here, see what's killing it win rate rise. So the highest win rate in the game is actually Bart Galio, but with Poppy. So that's nice. A little Poppy kind of raises the win rate from 51% all the way up to 56%. And again, much less or fewer matches played. So it could just literally be like 3 people spiking the win rate with this deck. But either way, that shows you that the deck has at least some amount of potential. Second highest win rate deck in the game. Uh-oh. We don't like to see that. Scion Draven is back. Woo! Scion Draven might be making a comeback. Oh, apparently it beats Viego Noxus. Oh, that's sick. I know it loses. Yeah, it loses to Thralls extremely hard. But, apparently, yeah. I mean, it is the anti-midrange deck, so like Viego Noxus is the anti-midrange deck. I actually commented on this like 2 weeks ago on my Meta Monday when it first popped up, saying how, remember old Draven Scion? This is the new Draven Scion. Well, apparently I'm just fucking dumb and wrong, and old Draven Scion is the new Draven Scion, and it is still the king of the anti-midrange decks, seeing as how it just like bodies Noxus Viego. So it still beats every other mid-range deck you see here. Beats Deep, beats Pantheon, Bard Poppy, Bard Galio, Viego Noxus, Timelines. Like, it beats all these other mid-range decks. Draven Scion might actually be sleeper right now. That deck's pretty sick. And then the third most played deck, coming in at just under 55% win rate, is Jace Lux. Is this the rally version? Yeah. So this is like a version I used to play where you try to essentially combo off. This isn't playing Poro Cannons though, which is pretty weird. But the idea is you get 4 Demacia from Vanguard Sergeant, or a back-to-back, but ideally 4 Demacia, and you can set up this really big like turn 5 4 Demacia rally turn because you get to cheat out 3 mana with Forge of Tomorrow. So you play like a board wide of units. Like I said, I usually play Poro Cannons because that way you can get elusive units in there. But you play Poro Cannons, you get a board wide of units, you go and then you get a Forge of Tomorrow in play, or a Forge Chief or 2, and you say, you go, okay, I'm going to cast 4 Demacia, pop my Forge of Tomorrow, get 3 mana back, and then attack you, and then Golden Age just attack you, and that turn 5 is just, like, absolutely ridiculous. You can do it on turn 5, you can do it on turn 6, you can do it on turn 7, obviously once you get to turn 8, I believe, you can always do it. No, turn 9 is when you can always do it. But yeah, you get it as early as turn 5, which is when it's absolutely absurd and your opponent can't really deal with it. So doesn't surprise me. It's really cool to see this deck. I went like 15-0 with this deck back in the like last patch. So cool to see it coming up. But yeah, that's going to be it for this Meta Monday. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys stick around. Like I said, more content coming out this week. Let me know if any decks here surprise you. Any decks here you want to see for... All right, show me the matches again. Any decks you guys want to see for this week? Let me know. I have a bunch planned out, but let's see. I have a couple funny ones planned out, but mostly like deck guides and competitive gameplay for you guys. So hope you guys enjoy that. If you do, again, subscribe here so you don't miss anything. Go join my Discord, link down in the description below. That's gonna be it for me. I'll see you guys in the next video.